Welcome to the Driving Change Podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to the Driving Change Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. And I want to ask you a question as you're listening and driving around your car, or maybe you're on the treadmill, wherever you're at today. If you were measured by the worst decisions that you made in your life, if that was the end of the story, where would you be today? And I think about that a lot. As I was preparing for our next guest, I was thinking about some of the lowest moments of my life. If I had been stuck there, if God would have not used those moments to do something transformational in my life, how much worse off would I be? And the answer is I'd be way worse off. I'd be absolutely in the pit. And our guest today, Joseph Johnson, is an amazing story of transformative recovery, the power of grace, the power of forgiveness, the power of taking some of your worst decisions and moments in your life and turning them into not just your testimony, but a powerful purpose that's now serving others, sometimes in the worst moments of their life. And so I can't wait for you to hear Joseph Johnson's story. Joseph, it is such an honor to have you on the Driving Change Podcast. Joseph is the founder and CEO of Change Course Ministries. We're going to get into this. We're going to get into a lot of his passion and purpose today. And I don't even want to give away his story in the intro because I want him to tell it as we go. So we're going to just jump right in. And Joseph, let's just let the audience get to know you. Take us back into your origin story and then walk us through kind of where you came from and then some of the things that transpired in your life that took you to the pit. And then we'll take you to the promise and let the audience hear just exactly all the amazing things that you're doing today.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. What a privilege it is to share the story. Everybody has stories, and every story can be powerful if we allow it to be powerful, if our focus is on taking our story to help others. You know, mine was a pretty typical upbringing. My parents were married. My dad was a mechanical engineer. We moved around a little bit. We ended up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and that's where he spent most of his time in his occupation. And everything seemed to be like a normal childhood until one day when, because I didn't see a lot of arguing or trouble in my home. And one day I remember I was upstairs. I've got 3 older sisters and a younger brother. And I was upstairs and I remember hearing a lot of commotion and crying and screaming by my sisters. And I ran downstairs and I saw my dad had my mom by the arms leaning over the table. And he let go and he walked out of the house and everybody was crying and I didn't understand what was going on, but I ran out to the porch where my dad was and he had his head hung down leaning against the railing. And he said to me, "Joe, you're going to have to be the man of the house now because I'm not going to live here anymore." And as a 7th grader that has ADHD, being the man of the house with 3 older sisters and a younger brother, I found real quickly that I wasn't very good at that. But in the midst of all that, I wanted to please my dad. And my dad and mom got a divorce, and I was a handful for my mom. And so about a year later, she told my dad, "He's too much to handle. I want him to go live with you." And my dad said, "Well, only if his brother comes too. I'll have the boys, but I need to have both the boys." So we went and lived with my dad. He got remarried, and we ended up having a blended family a few years later. And then you have the challenge of anytime you have a blended family like that, you've got to get used to each other. There's a lot of challenges in that. And I found myself learning this skill of people pleasing. I felt like in many times with my mom's desires, my dad's desires, and my new family, that I felt like I had to try to make everybody happy. Much of it was probably on me, but I felt as I had to try to make people pleased. And I had failed at that first attempt, but I thought I was going to do good at this. Well, as time went on, I ended up finding myself going off to college. My younger brother was getting into trouble, and I was trying to see how can I help my younger brother. My mom had gone to a counselor and become a Christian, given her life to Christ. And I said, who should I talk to help out Mark? He's struggling with getting in trouble with the law and doing stupid things. She said, go talk to this counselor. So I went to talk to the counselor, and he shared the gospel with me. He shared my brother's need for Christ, and that's the only way that he's going to have sustained change in his life. Well, it sounded great to me, and I said, I'll tell my brother that's what he needs to know. But here I was a football player in college, and I was partying and having a great time, and thought, man, those guys that are devoted Christians in college, we call those Bible beaters. And you try to avoid those guys, right? They're not part of the cool social crowd. So I told the counselor, I'll tell my brother and get him on this. And he said, well, no, you need to experience it yourself if you're going to share it with him effectively. So I prayed, and I said, I'm going to do this for him. But once he gets on this, I'm going to go back the way I was, and I'll have time for that later in my life. The amazing thing was when I said that prayer, I went back and opened the Bible, and for the first time ever, I couldn't put it down. All of a sudden, everything that I was reading came alive. And I tried to read the Bible 100 times before. You know, we'd go to church on Sundays, but it was not really an active faith for me. This time, I couldn't put it down. And there was a friend of mine that was called and said, hey, we got a keg, let's finish it off. And I said, no, I got to tell you what happened. Man, something happened to me. And he thought I was already drunk or something. And so he said, well, I said, yeah, I'm not interested. I just need to go a different direction. Anyway, from that point on, that was the beginning of my spiritual life. And I realized also, though, when you give your life to Christ, you bring a lot of baggage with you, and you bring it into your new family. And quite honestly, a people-pleasing addiction is pretty well accepted in the church organization, because, man, you'll do anything.
That's right.
Well, I pretty soon I got involved with church, and people were asking things of me, and I was living up to this life of being a very spiritual, strong man. I got into the financial world because of my ability to have relationships with people. And I wanted to give away all my work to help people with budgeting and everything else, but I wasn't selling anything. And our family couldn't live on that. And so, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't feel people pressured, and I was working so hard at keeping this facade of a strong spiritual person that had it all together. When at home, my life was falling apart. The kids, we ended up having kids after 5 years of marriage. We got married at 21, just a couple years after I gave my life to Christ at 19. So we were really young, and having kids kind of showed a lot of that baggage from my past, started to show up, and some anger issues. And so I was one way at home and a completely different person outside. Well, I got in the financial business, like I said, and now all of a sudden we weren't having the money we needed to pay for taxes and things like that. Well, I had experience with the jewelry business years before when I was working the jewelry business, and I could buy and sell diamonds. So I started to do that on the side. And as a registered investment advisor, it's not something you should do without being a registered investment. Well, all it took was one time when money was challenging, and I took money for a diamond that I didn't put into the diamond. And I ended up using it to pay our taxes, and then all of a sudden it began this mini Ponzi scheme to get from one person to another, and all of a sudden my life was just in chaos, where I was always thinking one good deal, and I'd be out of this mess. But it kept accumulating, and I was getting sicker and sicker, and my relationship with my wife was falling apart, and I was short with our kids. And my wife said one day afterwards, I found out later that she was praying as she drove into town, our little town where we were living, that she didn't know what was wrong with me, but asked that God would break me, and that she asked two things of him. One, you would spare his life, and second, you would give her the strength to ever walk through it.
Mm.
Because just a few days previous to that, I got after her and said, "What's the matter with you?" And she said, "What's the matter with me is I don't feel like I love you anymore."
Ooh.
And all of a sudden I realized that I had destroyed that relationship because of my actions. Well, she didn't know what was going on, and I was hiding this, and pretty soon I was getting sicker and sicker. It was like the psalmist that said, as I hid my sin, my body was eating away. And I came down with ulcerative colitis at early 30s and got a variety of different old person's diseases from the stress that was being caused by my hidden sin. And one day I couldn't take it anymore. And I confessed it. And it all came out in the financial firm I was working in. And all of a sudden, all of life fell apart. And I said to my wife, I have to talk to you tonight. And that's after I'd confessed it on that day to a client. And she thought I'd maybe had an affair or something like that. She didn't know what was going on. She knew we were having all kinds of problems. And I shared that with her, and we had no idea what was coming next. The one thing I did ask her is that I said, I can't live a false life anymore. Will you allow me to just give my deposition without an attorney? Because I'd met with an attorney, and he said that you're going to have to give me a retainer of $20,000, and you got to protect yourself. Got to be careful what you say. And I thought, man, I've been lying to people. And if I pay money to only say a little bit to protect myself, what am I doing? Am I really going to be free? And so we both, over tears and a lot of other counsel, decided that I would do that. So I just gave my deposition without representation.
Mm.
And from that point on, we pled guilty to mail fraud. It was as a result of money that was given to me that was sent through the mail. It became a federal crime rather than a state crime. And federal guidelines determine your sentencing. It's not like state crime, where a lot of times your first offense, you get a long, deferred sentence. Well, this was kind of throwing yourself at the feet of the court. I got a public defender. The public defender said, I can't do a whole lot for you because you pretty much told him everything.
Right.
And so we went to the sentencing hearing. The sentencing hearing was 11 months after I'd confessed. And, we had the FBI constantly and the SEC, and caused all kind of problems for the financial firm. And I was just feeling really, really down. And I had once said to my wife in the middle of that, you guys would be better off without me in your lives. And my wife, being the woman she was, she said, you think I'm going to raise these kids without you? You're out of your mind. So pull up your bootstraps and let's walk through this. I said I wouldn't leave you, and I won't, but only because of my vow before God. And so that was just a wake-up call for me, that moment. I was working in a grocery store overnight, loading shelves, and we were just barely squeaking by. But the church had created a restoration team for us. We're just a small church of 80. They created a restoration team for us, and they were there. We submitted to that restoration team for 2 years, and we did exactly what they told us to do. And anyway, we get to the sentencing hearing, and the prosecutor had indicated to the public defender that they were going to go easy on me because I shared everything. Well, he didn't. He came after me. And he said, so really what you owe people is really not the total of what you took, because you took money to give to people and pay things off. And I said, yeah. So he went after me for a full 2-year sentence to the judge. That was what he recommended, because the federal guidelines led up to that with the amount of money that he was showing that I changed hands. Well, the public defender stood up. He was not a Christian, but he didn't really help me much. And kind of, I was tore up on the stand. And he stood up and he said, Your Honor, the greatest deterrent from this man ever reoffending is to have a community of people in his lives that'll hold him accountable to a changed life. And if you look in this room right now, he has no lack of community. There were so many people supporting us. It was standing room only in the back. It was just the whole courtroom was packed with people that were there to support and help us.
Wow.
And the judge and my probation officer went back, and he came back out after about 15 minutes, and he said, I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to give you an additional downward departure for unusual acceptance of responsibility. And so my sentence went from 18 months down to a 12-month split sentence, 6 months in jail and 6 months under house arrest and 18 months under supervised release. You wouldn't think you'd cheer about a sentence, right? But that was a miracle. Literally, it was a miracle.
Yeah.
And so that set in motion on 1995, September 3rd, 1995, the day after Labor Day. I was going to be checking in the Yankton Federal Prison Camp in Yankton, South Dakota. So my family went up there a couple of days before. We stayed in a hotel just with the kids. Our kids were 2 to 10 years old, 4 of them. We drove on that morning to the front, to the door, and they dropped me off, and the kids were crying, and I was crying, and my wife was crying, and it was the worst day of our lives. It was the worst day of my life, no question. And you get in, and right away you strip down to nothing, and you sit in this little room, this white room with benches in the walls, and everybody's checking in, and you prepare for your cavity check. And I sat there, I thought, how in the world could this be me? How could I be in this place?
Like you're having an out-of-body experience at that point, right? You just...
Yeah, I'm thinking it's not possible. This is not the way my life was supposed to turn out. And I've disappointed to so many people and lied to so many people. And how could I ever get a job again? What can I ever do? So then and I was scared to death to go in. You know, when you have a vision of what prison's going to be like and what the men are going to be like,
right.
I'm afraid to meet these men, and I'm one of them, right?
Right.
The irony of all that. And so the men that I meet are men that changed my perspective on opportunity in America. I get out, and I'm going to have a community of people around me to help me find a job. That community helped us keep our little house when I was away by helping pay the mortgage. They helped care for my wife and kids while I was in. And these guys get out and they have nothing. One of my roommates was crippled. There were 6 roommates in these little room. There were 6 of us, 2 triple bunk beds. One of them had a crippled arm because of a drive-by shooting, went through his arm and killed his brother. And he gets out and he goes the same place. Another young man, Matt, who I grew to care deeply about. I'm 35 at this point. Matt was 21. Matt, over the last 10 years, had 5 different men living with he and his mom. Some would beat him. One of them sent him on a drug delivery, and that's how he got into drugs. Well, he gets out and he goes to the same place. And Matt went out, when he was out in the yard, Matt was Mr. B.A., bring it on, I'll fight anybody. But with me, for some reason, he was this boy who cried and shared his heart. And then Matt would come to me every day, and I was no place to counsel anybody. I was trying to figure out how I messed my life up so bad.
Right.
I'm not in a place to be a good counselor. But one thing I knew I could do is I could tell Matt every day something I saw in Matt that was special about him. And whether that's one day him come and say, man, I saw you smile. I like your smile, dude. You ought to do that more often. You got a good smile. Or, man, the way you talked to that other person and encouraged him, I love that. And I looked for something every single day about Matt in that 6 months. The last day I was there, Matt hugged me, grabbed a hold of me and hugged me. And you don't want to touch each other inside the prison because typically they think you're passing something to each other.
Right, right.
You're going to get another cavity check, and nobody likes the cavity check. So Anyway, Matt hugged me and Matt said, I love you. And he
Wow.
said, you're the closest thing to a father I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
That completely changed me. I don't know what Matt's doing now. I couldn't keep up with Matt. He was there for 18 months in the drug rehab program, and I don't know what Matt's doing now, but I'll never forget him. And I got out, and because of my restoration team, I got opportunity to have a job. There was an opening with a service master that needed somebody to run their operations, a cleaning company. And I said, and the owner said, no, I don't want to hire him. He's a felon. And one of the people on the restoration team said, you need to hire him. You need to give him a chance. And he hired me. And here was a 15-year-old service master, about 70 employees, a nice little 15 years old, my nice little franchise. I didn't know what I was doing, but I loved the people we hired. And I loved being out there cleaning with toilets more than being in the office and talking to clients, because I got to be with people that I could breathe hope into. And I did the same thing I did with Matt, every single person. Well, over the next 14 years, we've become the second largest service master in North America with over 350 employees. And I left there. Felt like it was time for me to leave. And I ended up being a partner with another gentleman who had 30 employees. We did the same culture. We created the same culture. And over the next 10 years, we were on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing company 6 years straight. And we became larger than the service master. All because I had the opportunity to encourage people. And throughout that whole time, I said I had this vision of one day starting a training center for men coming out of prison and giving them the same community and network and opportunity that I had, because I thought, why should I, as a middle-class white man, have something that these people from different cultures and backgrounds shouldn't have too? I've got to do something about that. Why can't that change? And so that ends up where our pursuit was for the whole idea of Change Course.
Wow. Man, what an amazing story. And it's one of those where I could probably we just stop the episode now and say, okay, drop the mic. All right, go. Everybody go down to change-course.org and donate and do this. But there's so much more to that. I think that as you're telling your story, because obviously we're big fans of stories around here, I'm struck by how everyone's story has some form of that arc. It doesn't mean that you were actually convicted of a felony and went to prison and learned but it seems like every one of us has a story where you were going one direction, trying to find out who you were, getting lost in what the world tells you should be, becoming somebody you were never meant to be. And if you're lucky enough to have other people help lift you up out of that, or by just, miraculously God lifts you up out of that, then at some point you start to turn the corner into becoming who you were meant to be. And it sounds to me like that experience, is as much as hell as it was, as you reflect back on it. I've heard this story before. Like, you probably would say, I would have changed it, but only if I could have still gotten to the same place. And it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to get to the place you are today if you hadn't gone through that.
Well, it started with a prayer of my wife that first of all, Jeff, I married way over my head.
Right.
And I want to encourage every young man, marry a woman that loves Jesus more than you, because you're going to need it someday.
Absolutely.
And her prayer to say, break him, but save his life and give me the strength to walk through it. And so God is using us now to breathe hope into people. And so my wife and I do this together. She's the program director. And so she does the first 6 weeks of a personal development and just pours goodness into them. Says, here's who you really are. Don't buy that story. And we kind of talk about it like we imagine a world without prisons, and then we try to create that world. Like what Father Boyle said, the founder of Homeboy Ministries, where he really focused on helping gang members get out of that, quit thinking the same way. We really are just products of the story we've been telling ourselves. We got to change the story. So in the midst of this second business that I was in, we were doing great. We did a disinfection program through COVID. And I mean, our business was booming. We couldn't hire enough people during COVID, right? But I kept waking up at night and I kept thinking of the training center. I can't even sleep. And I said to Karen, I think it's time. We're supposed to do this. And the church has sent us a lot of people over the years with baggage like ours to encourage them and give them hope. And that's the power of testimony, that each of us has one. And if we as a body of people, a body of believers, know each other's story and we can send that person to the person who can look them in the eye and say, I get it. The power of that is far greater than somebody like me who hasn't experienced that same thing. And so we had the opportunity to do that. And then we ended up trying to figure out what that model was going to look like. And we found a model in Denver called Cross Purpose that was 10 years old, right in the gang district of Denver. And we watched it for a week. My wife and I spent a week there and just cried over the stories and saw amazing changes in people. And I said to the CEO, Jason Jans, hey, if we do this in Des Moines, will you help me? And he said, absolutely. You're for your own 501c3, you raise your own money, but I'll give you all of our protocol, I'll give you all of our procedures, all of everything we've developed, and you can just rebrand it for free. And that's how we came back, flew back, and then February of 2022, I resigned from my work, and we started Change Course.
So give us a couple of stories that really pop in your head of kind of life change of folks that you've recently, maybe in the last 12 months, without obviously divulging any privacy issues, but give us a couple of stories that really highlight what it means to be a part of this journey if you're incarcerated and come out, and what that looks like today.
Well, people who come out of incarceration, the unemployment rate is crazy high. I mean, even between 60 and 65% in the first 4 years of them being out, they're unemployed. And so the opportunities they have aren't the same. For example, we have a lady named Tiffany who came out of incarceration. She had a drug problem. She ended up having kids. She was on the streets doing drugs for 7 years, lost all of her kids, custody of all of her kids. She tried to kill herself and the rope broke. And she decided when she overdosed one night and woke up from that overdose that she had to make a change. And she went to a women's shelter where she heard about Change Course. So we got her into Change Course. She came into one of our programs. She was diligent at doing the work. The first 6 weeks of that personal development. Then we go into a career track where we pay for their tuition to get a workplace certification. She wanted to be in the pharmacy area. And so she did that track, ended up getting a job graduating from the program, ended up getting a job with Walgreens as a pharmacy tech. And now she's working towards moving up in that and also going back for more education. She got all of her kids back. Her life has completely changed. And she felt like this just saved my life. Wow. She needed community. And the secret sauce of what we do is community. Everybody needs community, right? And when you're going to have one, it's maybe dysfunctional, maybe bad, right, but they're afraid to walk away from a dysfunctional community because they're afraid to be alone. So let's create a loving environment that says you're safe here and there's no judgment. Matter of fact, the first day of every class, I tell my story and I say, we may look different, but guess what? We probably have a very similar background. And if it weren't for opportunities given to me by a loving community that wrapped their arms around me, I don't know where I'd be today.
Wow. Yeah, that's so powerful. How do you combat? I've always thought the hard part is breaking that cycle, right? Of I only know what I know. So if I come out of a bad environment and I'm ended up incarcerated, whether I was in drugs or whether I was just in whatever the situation was, and in one side of it, I go back out and I'm like, well, I don't want to go get a real job because I can make too much money doing illegal stuff, and so I got to fight that cycle and that narrative, right? Or the other side of it is I don't deserve a job, so I'll just go and I'll just figure out a way to live off the government. Or there's all kinds of bad narratives that keep people into that poverty cycle or crime cycle. How do you guys break those cycles so that people realize there's a better way? And get them closer to who they really know they were meant to be. How do you break some of those false narratives?
I'll give you an example. I never thought that I would be in this position, but I remember one day there's a drug dealer that wanted to talk to me. So I met him, and he's got his hood up, and he's got 3 phones, and he's looking around, and guy drives by with a big loud car, with the bass rumbling, and he's like thinking, oh, I wonder if that's for me. And I'm sitting there thinking, I could get shot here. I've never been in this situation. But, and just talking to that young man, he's just scared. He doesn't want to live that way. And so we can share with him, you don't have to. And the power of the stories of people who've been successful, that's how you convince people that they can do it too. So what we ask of our people, and we commission them when they graduate, that the community did this for you, what are you going to do for the community? Would you allow us to use your story to give other people hope that feel like they can't get out of what they're in? Because they can make quick money. Quite honestly, $25 an hour doesn't sound very good to a drug dealer, right?
Right.
But they're looking over their shoulder all the time. They can't even enjoy the money that they make. And they certainly will never have a family. They've got broken homes. They're worried. They do have a heart for their children, but they don't know what to do. And they're oftentimes the children's been taken away from them. So I think just sitting down with them and loving these people, putting your arms around them. We can't change poverty by throwing money at it. You got to walk with these people. Right. You got to put your arms around them and say, let me walk. You can't just say, here's a fish for today. You can't even just say, here, I'll teach you to fish. You've got to show them different equipment they can use. You got to lead them to the pond. You got to fish with them for a while and show them how to reel it in. It's not an overnight answer. If we want to alleviate poverty as a church, as a Christian community, then get your hands dirty. Go down and realize, and the volunteers that we have that we assign to our participants, the participants in the program, we call them leaders because we're teaching them to be leaders of their life. And the volunteers we call allies because they're their cheerleaders. They're cheering them on. Well, those people, they need to realize once you start to volunteer and sit down with these people and you hear their stories, our volunteers say, I thought I was helping change somebody. I'm a completely different person.
Right.
Because I realize these people are just like me. I mean, we're connecting. People connect, Jeff, on their failures, not on their successes.
Yeah.
Deep connection comes through our connection on our failures. The success stuff just tends to be so surfacey.
Yeah, you touch on so many things, right? We might all come from different backgrounds and have different cultures and different demographics, but we're all kind of made in the imago Dei, right? We're all made in the image of God, and we all seek the same things, right? We seek safety, we seek purpose, we seek community, to your point, we seek connection. These are all universal things, and everybody's story can take them off the track from those things on a regular basis. And just because someone over here might look like the suburban brokenness sometimes is more hidden than some of the stuff that's in the inner city and the brokenness.
No question.
There. It's just much, right? And so I love what you're doing. Obviously, it's easy to love, but it also comes at a cost, right? Not just emotional cost to you and your allies that serve, but it also comes as a cost to the organization. Like, how do you guys fund this? Like, how does this, because it's not cheap to put these people through this program and educate them and get them out in workforce and all that stuff. Like, is this all just through volunteer donations, or how do you guys build enough resources to be able to fund this?
It's a great question. We'll be 2 years old from our first class in November of this year. So it costs about $23,000 per leader, per person. to get them to graduation. So that 6-month program, it's a lot of hands-on. We do one-on-one coaching. So they're coached daily. They're coached on a regular basis. You're trying to change habits. You're trying to teach some basic things that you and I grew up with, manners at the table, how to look somebody in the eye, how to shake a hand, how to tell your story, how to deal with an unreasonable person, all those simple things, but they're brand new for these people. So it takes $23,000 a person right now. We hope to get it down to 11 just by increasing our numbers. It's all been private donations. My wife and I, from the very beginning, said, this is where everything we've ever made is going to go into it. We're going to end our lives this way. We're going to give it all. I told my kids, look, I'll have enough to bury me, but that's it. We're giving it all away. And all 4 of our kids and their mates and their spouses are all participating. They're all in because we went through this together as a family, and they understand. They understand kids of parents that have struggled like this. So we graduated 32 people so far in 3 classes. The average wage at the start was less than $15,000 a year, plus very few had benefits. The average wage of our graduates, $41,000, and all of them had benefits, and 65% of them had full benefits.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, but more importantly, the cool thing is this. We really do this good deed to build goodwill to share the good news. So it's the most natural evangelical process I've been a part of. We've got people that step in our door, Jeff, that would never step in a church.
Yeah.
But the moment they step in this door, they feel a love they've never felt before. They sense a love that's real and genuine and non-judgmental and safe. We tell them how beautiful they are. We whisper in their ear every day, you are made for a purpose. Nobody can do what you can do. You have something to give this community that only you can give. You're a beautiful person every single day. And then we have spiritual development, which is optional. You could come as an atheist and leave as an atheist. You could come as a Buddhist and leave as a Buddhist. But if you want, during lunch, during our 6-week personal development, you can come to a free lunch. And we're going to share with you why we do what we do. Because a lot of them come to us and say, why do you do this? If it's not for profit, why do you do this? And my answer simply is that I believe if Jesus was here, he'd be here with you.
Wow.
This is where I think he'd be.
Well, that's what the old adage, right? The best sermons are caught, not taught.
Yeah.
And you're letting them catch it, and by just loving them.
And they're responding. Last week in church, we had 2 people in our current program say, can we come to church with you? Because when we finish creating a community, the church, when we get done with them, the church has to take over.
Right.
And that's really important. And ultimately, all we're doing is fulfilling the Great Commission, right?
Yeah.
We're preaching good news to the poor. We're binding the brokenhearted. We're proclaiming liberty to the captives. We're opening the prison doors to those that are bound. I mean, Jesus, that's the prophecy of Jesus, and he repeats it in Luke 4, and he said, today that prophecy has come true. Well, if I'm crucified with Christ, it's no longer I who live. I want to be that.
Yeah, I love that. We founded our business on Romans 12:2, and it sounds like you founded yours on Isaiah 61.
Yeah.
What is that, 61:1, right? That's the mission statement.
It is.
And I love it. I think that's amazing. And how can people learn more about how to go get plugged in? And maybe right now there could be a Joseph Johnson listening in a completely different part of the country or the world who's like, hey, I'm feeling called to build this thing in my city. How can they learn more about either giving and donating to things happening in Des Moines, or becoming an ally for your group, or do you have networks outside of there that they can get plugged into? Like, how can people just learn more and both to get involved with their time, but also to donate a little bit of their treasure? How can we learn more about that?
Well, if you have a desire to do something like this in your own town, the model works. We were the 4th model when we signed up, and I went to the CEO of Change Cross Purpose in Denver, and I said, we need to make this a network. We need to meet regularly and learn from each other. So he started the Cross Purpose Network. Now, 2 years later, there's 17 of these models across the United States
Oh, wow.
because it works. So now you could get involved. You could go with you could look up Cross Purpose Network in Denver, and you could find the opportunities, or contact us, and I could lead you to they have regular opportunities to come and visit and see what this model looks like, and they would help you to start a model. For us, change-course.org is where people can find us. We always need funding. Matter of fact, I decided I needed a sustainable revenue source outside of just giving. So we started Change Course Cleaning just a week ago.
Oh, you did?
And so we're going to provide commercial cleaning with a purpose, that you're going to spend your money for cleaning anyway. Why not have your money for cleaning also go to alleviate poverty in the community? And you're going to get just the same quality as anybody else that's making a profit off of you. And we're doing auto detailing too. So we determined, man, I want this to be sustainable. My wife and I,
Right.
we're not spring chickens. We're 65. So if I'm out of here, I want 8 years, I want to be able to have this running all on its own, sustainable. And really, our goal is to help 100 people out of poverty every single year.
Wow.
And so we need help like that. If you want to be an ally, you want to help, you ought to read the book When Helping Hurts. That's one of a book that I read from the very beginning, because it's not about throwing money. If you really want to help with poverty, go help with poverty, because loving your neighbor is really inconvenient. And Jesus knew that, right?
Yeah.
Because he said, it's not easy, but it's required if you're going to follow me. It's no longer your life.
You lay it down.
And so once you make that decision, then ultimately my decision for the rest of my life is to emulate Christ and help others make a right decision for where they're going to spend eternity.
Well, Joseph, that's amazing. And I know you don't, at this point, you're not looking for accolades, and you're not looking for your name in headlines. And I think that's why this is being successful, because of the humility that you've shown by starting this, and what is getting blessed because it's being done for the right reasons. So I just pray favor on your new cleaning business, that it would just explode in Des Moines.
It's pretty exciting.
And it'll self-fund all of the work that's happening at the ministry. And I think that you're living a life that's an example for all of us. And all at the end of the day, we all want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And I think that you're going to hear that in spades from what you're doing right now to impact so many people's lives. So thank you for being an inspiration to all of us. And those that are listening out there, whether you live in the Des Moines area or not, it's irrelevant. Go check out change-course.org. Get plugged in into what they're doing there. Help if you can. If you're in the area and you own a business, you got a new cleaning company to sign up for. So go out there and get the Change Course commercial cleaning company to get in there and make a big difference for that as well. And is there anything else, closing comments you have, Joseph, that you'd like to leave the group with?
I just want to challenge people to just don't sit on the sidelines, man. We can do so much. You can do so much to change a life by loving them. To think what happened to me when I was a mess, and I thought I was no good to anybody, and I had the chance to do that for this guy named Matt for 6 months. There's a lot of Matts out there, Jeff. And you all it takes is being willing to be inconvenienced, and going out there and putting your arms around them, and just telling them the things you see in them that are just beautiful. That's what it's intentional encouragement.
Yeah.
And you're doing that. That's what you do with your podcast. And thank you for that, because these kind of things need to get out there. All that you put out there is so positive and encouraging and challenging to people to grow and become better people.
So good.
And I love it. And so thank you for what you do too.
Oh, it's an honor, and it certainly has been an honor to have you on. And I can't wait for this episode to launch and for people to hear it, because it's going to inspire a lot of people to if they're on the edge of sitting on the sideline. This will nudge enough people, hopefully off the bench and into the game, that it'll make a meaningful difference just from simply hearing this. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.